We've all been there. You finish a build, step back, and something feels off. The build looks great, but everything around it feels flat, empty, like it's just sitting in the default Minecraft world. So, how do we fix this? In this episode, I'm going to show you 5 simple techniques that I use to make my world feel more alive, to make it feel like a place that's lived in and actually exists. Custom trees, mysterious structures, wild terrain, ancient ruins, and paths that tie it all together. So, let's dive straight in. Today, we're on Truly Bedrock Season 7, where we're going to be building near this gorgeous and Goliath tree that we built in the last few episodes. Now, the area around our pie lake, where myself, Merely Adequate, and Moss Logic are hanging out, is really starting to shape together with some very gorgeous builds. However, the area near the tree leaves much to be desired, and I have the added challenge of being the person responsible for connecting our area to the Nether hub, which means we need to start thinking about some system that will allow us to bridge the need to beautify this area with the need to go into the Nether, and I have just the idea. That's going to be to build in some ancient type ruins that we're going to mirror both on the overworld and the underworld side in order to combine these two together. Now, the thing that I think about when I think about ancient ruins is a Gothic castle or a Gothic style church, something with large sweeping archways that really stand out, but in our case here has really started to fall apart. And what I'm going to try to replicate here is just some of those arches using a little bit of stone, mossy cobblestone, and then a little bit of the mossy stone bricks, just to make it look a little bit even and worn. Now, a couple other things that I like to think about when working on this is how does this fit into the lore? If this is a Gothic church that's in here, what's the lore behind a giant tree that sprouted up in the middle of it? Did the tree used to be part of this build, or did this tree sprout up afterwards? And I think adding these types of questions to your build really helps establish that this is a different part of your scenery, and that little bit of storytelling really help transforms it from just a build that we have here to something that is really unique and transformative. Now, a couple pieces of advice that I have for building these types of structures is to take advantage of the new copper bars that we have in here. Everything with copper is quite nice, but when the copper bars really oxidize, they look a whole lot more like rebar than the iron bars do. And maybe this is just my perception of this, but the little bit of green helps tie it together more, I think, with the green colors that you get from the stone and the mossy cobble. Another trick that I'm using over here that you may or may not have is these little bit of mini blocks that you have up here. I've actually stretched some of the mini blocks along some of these posts to make it look just like a half block taller, and then connected it a little bit with, say the lanterns right here. And once all of this oxidizes, it'll really kind of look a lot closer to what my original vision is. But having a big structure like this in your world, especially when you start thinking about the lore, these types of questions really help kind of solidify what your build is about. When people walk by your build, they shouldn't just say, wow, it's a pretty build. You should hopefully get them to say, wow, I wonder why that was built there. I wonder what the story is behind it. And I think this type of build is the type of build that really makes you wonder what the deeper lore is behind in here. Now, my second piece of advice is kind of self-evident in this, but make sure you take advantage of bone meal. There's a difference between a structure that you add into the world that is just sitting there on regular terrain, and a structure that you have decorated with bone meal and then the moss blocks. These types of things really make this feel more built into the world, and with this build in particular, makes it really feel like this build has aged and the terrain has also aged alongside of it. The next thing that I recommend that everyone add to their world to really make it kind of stand out and feel more alive is something other than the default Minecraft trees. You can add in all the Minecraft trees that you want in the world, but when everything looks like just the basic birch tree, well, everything doesn't really look so great. You need variety, and you need things that look different and also provide a little bit different of a feel. So your trees don't need to look perfect. Just grab yourself a couple of blocks that match in color. I'm using birch along with some of the new pale oak here, and kind of just throw leaves around it. It will take a while for you to kind of find what feels natural, and maybe what you start off right away isn't perfect, but just keep experimenting with how you decide to have your leaves strewn across this build, and eventually you will come to something that feels quite natural and normal to you. And even if it's not the best tree that you've ever built, it's still going to look a whole lot better than what Minecraft gets you by default. So once you have your basic tree shape in place and have the leaves in, you can really start trying to decorate it. And a couple things that I recommend is take advantage of trapdoors. You can place a trapdoor and then place some hanging vines or even regular vines around it, just to kind of add in a little bit of light and also just make it feel a little bit different. Now, I don't think in this build that I'm going to be keeping the hanging vines. I may end up choosing to do something a little bit different, but the hanging vines can really add a lot, especially if you're just kind of dealing with whether you even really like the shape or not. The other thing that you can do is something you typically see more on Java, just because you can, I don't know, place these things a little bit better, but grab yourself some moss blocks and every now and then just kind of scatter it in and see if you can get these little half pieces of grass to pop up in here. It really adds a lot to your build, especially if you're kind of working on leaves kind of towards the lower levels, where it adds in a little bit of vertical height. And if your tree is kind of lacking, you feel, in that vertical height department, for whatever reason, maybe, you know, the tree is just kind of more stubby and it's a little more wider, you can just keep bone milling this over and over again and just wait until you get these little pieces of grass, and that'll really help make your tree look even taller than it actually is. I'm not a big fan of putting the azalea bushes directly on the tree here, but there are some places where I think that it can really work, especially if you're trying to make your tree look a little bit scrawny in some places, and kind of, you want that feel that part of the tree is maybe a little bit more barren and a little more hollow. But if you just keep kind of working around this, getting rid of these little carpets that pop up in here and waiting till you get the grass, I think you'll end up with quite a very, very nice touch. Now, another building technique that I think you can use with your trees to really kind of make it stand out, especially if you don't like the glowberries as a vine type approach, is to pillar up with a couple blocks and then take advantage of green candles, because green candles are not affected by gravity, which means that you can place them, knock the block out down from underneath them, and kind of make your own custom vines using candles. And I think that this adds kind of a really neat and interesting effect, especially when you kind of are looking at it from a little bit far behind. They aren't as thick as the glowberries are, which means the effect you get is going to be unique and different. And I think when you have a bunch of people on your server that are kind of also doing their own unique building techniques, having something that stands out really makes your build stand out. It's different. People like different things, and anything that you can do that is different, I think, is always just going to pop a little bit more. Now, when you're building anything, but especially trees, I do recommend that every now and then you take a step back and admire or, you know, critique what you've built so far. I see a couple things in here that I think I'm going to add in a little bit later, like some additional lanterns, maybe some copper lights, but just make sure that you're looking around and taking a look about how your build looks so you can really get a feel for what you think you need to correct maybe later. I think that there's two approaches that you can take when building something. One is to build it large and impressive, and the other is to build it very, very subtle. And the subtle, I think, is potentially the more difficult, especially if you're trying to build something small and something that's meant to be blended into the background, something that people are not meant to focus on, but rather they're meant to walk by and help drive them further into immersion in your world. And I think one of the things that you can add in here is these little tiny structures that expands upon the lore of your area or the lore of the world that you're working on. And right over here, I think one of the best things that we can add, especially since we're trying to add in this train line wall that's going to go up behind this, is kind of this stone wall like structure. This can be, say, like a a regular wall that you might have put up in defense of a city. It could be a wall that you put in to keep your animals, your sheep or your cows or whatever it may be, kind of confined to a certain area. But these types of little structures just kind of scattered along and then maybe fallen into disrepair are really the type of things that can help bring your world more alive. It makes your world feel like there's history in here that for some reason is no longer there. Maybe it's lost. Maybe you have a good reason why this wall isn't being maintained anymore. Maybe just the wall just broke down and you just haven't had time to fix it. But adding your time just to kind of make a broken down wall that doesn't really look pretty into your world, I think can add quite a bit. Stairs, mossy cobble, kind of anything that you can get your hands on to vary the depth is really going to end up adding a lot, especially when you start adding in, a little bit of this regular stone, the cobblestone, and then some of these spruce wood. I think spruce wood really adds a lot in comparison to other woods because it's a little bit on the darker side, which makes it look a little bit more weathered without looking too dark with, say, something like dark oak. The other things that you can add to your wall here is these copper bars. Like I said earlier, once these copper bars oxidize to the step just before they are fully weathered, I think that they look really, really good. It makes it look like there's rebar sticking out of here that is going to help support this. So it's not just a stone wall. It's a stone wall that was planned and kind of put together with a little bit more care. Same thing with these lights here, just a little bit of lights kind of scattered around. One will help, obviously light up the build and help with mob spawning, but will also help accentuate certain areas that you want people to focus on. Anything that you want someone to focus on, add a light, add some color. That will help people draw their attention to one part of the build. And in this case, I'm placing the lights there just so that people look and see, oh, there is indeed a wall over here. Now, you can either set this back quite a ways, or you can leave it more front and center as I did here. And if you're going to leave it kind of more on the front and center side, one of the things I recommend that you do is try not to spam so much bone meal or grass right in front of it. You do want this to be visible, more or less, and spamming a whole bunch of grass. It works if you want this to feel like a rugged path that is kind of overgrown, but this is kind of a little bit more kept one. So having some low-lying grass in front of this, I think is really going to help this stand out a little bit more. Make sure also that when you're walking through that you're kind of just experiencing it as if you were walking through this. And if you can get away with it, try not to do it at night when you haven't slept in a really, really long time. These structures don't have to be big, though. They can be quite small if you want to kind of use your imagination about where they came from. Over here, just to help kind of break up the terrain and distract the eye and keep things from looking so bland and monotonous, what I'm going to do over here is just place in, say these little small structures. And that's 2 pieces of wall, a stair, and then a block with some copper on it. And that's it. It's not going to look pretty. It's not meant to look pretty. It's meant to look simple and basic. But every now and then you can kind of just scatter some of these materials around, and that will really help make your build feel just a little bit more different. I do think that with these types of builds, though, you do need to stick with more of the stone rather than using cobblestone. And if you're going for the really ruined effect, make sure that you're kind of scattering the building blocks that you're working with kind of around the entirety of the build, rather than just having the pieces right there. Having the stone looks like it fell down is one thing. Having it looks like it was buried under a little bit of ancient terrain is a whole other thing that can really help kind of divide up the color scheme that you have. And then, every now and then just place in a couple of random pieces of wall. Maybe this is a rock. Maybe this is something, you can make up your mind for whatever this is. It doesn't need to really be a lot, but just kind of scatter it in around, and eventually you'll end up with something that looks like maybe it fell off part of the church, or it's part of the wall that you were working on earlier. Now, I know that these things seem small, but it's these little small things that really start to make your world feel alive and lived in a way that the larger builds really can't do justice for. So my last piece of advice for building these smaller structures is probably spend more time on them than you do maybe the larger builds, because they're the types of things that drive immersion in your world. Now, the last thing that I think everyone should be doing in their world to really tie it all together is adding in paths. Paths are the secret sauce that force those who wander through your builds in Minecraft to have a certain perspective by which they experience things. It is the ultimate way to achieve forced perspective, and while they're on that path, they deserve to have something a little bit nicer, and it doesn't take a lot in Minecraft. The path blocks already work wonders, but add in a little bit of slabs so that people don't have to jump up an entire block, some coarse dirt, maybe even some rooted dirt, some of those stalactite blocks, and if you have areas that you can carve out a little bit of the regular dirt, they add wonders towards making your build feel like they're actually on a well-maintained path. Of course, when you want to bring your build up to, say, like your brand new nether portal, stone is an excellent choice as well to make it more official. If you want this path to be, say, more consistently traveled, or you want it to look like it's meant to be traveled a lot more frequently, it's a great choice for that. And as you kind of wander into the distance, sometimes leaving the path sparse really helps indicate that this isn't a well-maintained piece of highway. Not every piece of road needs to be with the same level of care and maintenance as every place in the game. You can have differences in here, and I think those differences will really help highlight the various levels of maintenance that exist in your world. But when all's said and done, nothing says "come follow me" like a path off into your builds. And that's the secret sauce that makes everything tie together. What about you? Do you have any building tricks that you like using in your world to make it feel more alive? Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorites are. Let me know which one of these you're going to try next in your world. And if you're interested in checking out some other build ideas, make sure that you check out the linked video that YouTube thinks you'll like up there. I think you'll like what that one has to teach you. But as always, beautiful pixels, thanks so much for watching. My name's Alaydriem, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Goodbye.